middle and the front was a little round thing for an ink bottle. And we had pens, not ballpoints, you had ink, and any of your important papers, like penmanship papers, you had to write in ink. And that was a pain, because you had to dip this pen into the ink, and of course, if you weren't very careful, it would drip and wreck your paper. And for people like me that were left-handed, we had a terrible time, because if I'm writing up here with ink, it still doesn't dry immediately. My hand would go over what I write, and it would smear, and I'd always get a crummy mark for being a poor writer. If you're right-handed, just so you know from following, there you put it in, you're writing ahead of the letters, and so you didn't smear yours. I was a good reader. First grade I got way ahead of the reading. Second grade I brought home my first report card. I still remember that teacher. I didn't like her. And I still, looking back years after, I think she was a poor teacher. Instead of going home, what we had on our report cards in those days was G for very good, S for satisfactory, U for unsatisfactory. I got all G's in the first grade. I went home with my second grade card and everything was U for unsatisfactory. My mother and dad, of course, were sort of in shock. They did call up post-problem. She said, I can't read anything he writes. Now today, we have a lot of people that are left-handed. In those days, they tried to get you not to. They come across and slap my hand with a ruler, trying to get me to use the other hand, but I never could change. So anyway, they agreed that I would print. And you can print nicely. And do you know that I never learned to do cursive except to print my name on a check? I've used printing my whole life, including college. Another thing you wouldn't like about schools, every room, not just in Escanaba, up here in this corner, for instance, there'd be a stick hanging, like a yardstick. It wasn't usually used for measuring. Would you like to volunteer for me? Stand up. Let's just say that he talked when he shouldn't. And I'll tell you, they were much stricter today than I was, and I was pretty strict. You really behaved. So if he had been talking and interrupted me or playing with something, I'd say, what's your name? Riley. Riley, come up front please and bend over. I go over to that corner, every teacher did this, not all. Got that yardstick and they hit him. Started to take foot. That was white. No, I'm not kidding. But everybody was more respectful. Another, you know, when you go out to recess, you have aides and people that watch you. When I first taught, you can remember the first years and long before, when I went to school, nobody ever went out with you. It was up to the kids, us, to settle our own arguments. So, for instance, let's say this is recess time, and your teacher would just say, all right, recess time. She'd maybe have her coffee or do some work in her room or something, you go out. If somebody was pushing or shoving, you hoped she or he, all the elementary teachers were she's in those days. You hoped that she didn't find out about it, because then there would really be trouble. So kids didn't paddle even if something happened, but they learned something you don't learn today. You learn how to solve your own problems growing up and work them out. Some people rarely had a fight. And the worst thing than your teacher finding out was if some friend of yours would go home and you live near you and tell your mom or dad, because that was worse, because your mom and dad would probably give you 10 spankings. They wouldn't say, oh, you poor little thing. Somebody probably picked on you or something. No. But you know, we had very few problems. That's why no aides or teachers went outside. You just did it yourself. We had one funny thing about recesses, and I'll never forget, 4th grade. They didn't have bells or anything. It was up to the teacher sort of remember his time. And so this time, I guess we were doing something, and the teacher didn't stop and kept going. And after about 5 minutes, it was winter time, one of the boys raised his hand and said, Mrs. Riley was her name. Mrs. Riley, you forgot recess time. And she said, oh, is that right? She said, well, you get your coat on. I'll say, you go out, get your coat, you go out and play. The rest of us will be in here working. And she never went out to call him back in. He stayed out there till lunchtime. But nobody ever reminded the teacher again she forgot it was recess time. But schools were fun, were pleasant, I love school. There were no school buses.